January, Friday the 19th, and thank you so much for joining us. Today we're talking about several community issues, so we're glad that you can join us. I'd like to say hello and welcome to Michelle Wilcox. She is COO of Crossroads, Rhode Island. Michelle, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
We're excited to have this conversation today. So Crossroads, as many of you know, is the largest homeless services organization in Rhode Island, so we're happy to have you in studio. So we're going to talk about a couple things here today. The weather in Rhode Island, and really the whole country, has been very turbulent over the past couple of weeks. We had that really tough stretch at the end of December and January, so we're going to talk about Crossroads' response over the course of the rough weather that we had. And then we're going to talk about some solutions to homelessness, because Crossroads doesn't just provide immediate relief, but you have also worked through and have helped many families and individuals come out on top. So we're going to talk about that. But I'd first like to talk to you a little bit about and get your thoughts on the Providence City Council last night passed a resolution. They're creating a special committee to go over and look at and recommend some solutions to homelessness. And they just passed this resolution last night. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. I had not heard about the Providence City Council resolution until I got here today with you, and so took a quick look at it, and certainly it's not something that we knew about, but in reading it, it seems to me that it's on the right track, and certainly as it's written, the City Council is resolved to create a commission to study and come up with plans to help the people in Providence who experience homelessness and reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness, and so that's certainly a very positive thing, and I think if we can be a help to that, we would be.
Do you think that the city, in this case, they're creating a special subcommittee to look into this, to do the research? Do you think, or do you hope to see them reach out to services organizations like yourself for input and certain messaging and continued research?
Yes, I mean, and again, in reading the way the resolution was written, they were quoting extensively from data and statistics that are provided by the Coalition for the Homeless, which the data comes from the providers like Crossroads. So it seems like, again, without knowing a lot about it, it seems like it's a positive thing, and I certainly look forward to hearing more about it.
Great. So we are on the right track, hopefully. Again, that just happened last night at the Providence City Council meeting. So any progress that we can see moving forward on this issue and helping those that are in homelessness, and it's a positive message then.
Absolutely, yes.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about what Crossroads Rhode Island does. The organization has been well-founded within this community for a long time. We've had you here on the program, not you specifically, but we've had Crossroads Rhode Island on the program. Talk to us a little bit about what this past year has been like for your organization. We just popped out of 2017 and we're into 2018, but talk to us just a little bit about what 2017 saw overall.
Sure. So, 2017 was another, booming year for Crossroads. Unfortunately, homelessness is a booming business, and we're experiencing with the coming out of the recession, the Great Recession. We saw numbers really reach all-time high during that period, and they've leveled out a little bit. But the fact is, we still have way too many people in the state, individuals and families, adults and children who find themselves experiencing homelessness. Last year we served over 3,200 individuals in one of our programs. That's just Crossroads. Statewide, there's somewhere around 4,000 or so, perhaps a little more than that, people who at one point during the year may find themselves homeless. And we know that the solution to homelessness is housing. It's as simple as that. And yet, in the economy that we have here in Rhode Island, housing prices are extremely high. The cost of housing, is greater than what incomes can keep up with. And on top of that, vacancy rates in Providence in particular and in Rhode Island are extremely low, and so that's driving the cost of housing up even further. And this is a real problem that we have to deal with and try to address.
What's so interesting too is that we're seeing this not only here, but we're seeing this problem nationwide. This is it's a continuous thing, and I don't think any community has been left untouched. So it's something that we're all going to have to deal with, and the simple solution of housing is something that we just need to figure out. So we're going to continue to talk about that through the course of this discussion, which I think is something that we all really need to pay attention to, whether people want to address it or not. It's something that needs to be paid attention to.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the cold weather response, because the weather that we suffered in December and early January was brutal, and I think people just walking around outside were troubled, and you can just think about people who don't have a shelter to go to, didn't have a home to go to. It really struck a lot of chords and struck a lot of hearts. Talk to us a little bit about what Crossroads does in these situations when we have severe weather.
Sure. So the fact is, and the good news is that Rhode Island overall has a very low, relatively speaking, unsheltered homeless population. Compared to other states and other communities, we actually do a pretty good job of making sure the majority of folks who find themselves homeless have a shelter to go to. Sometimes, and in the case of the storm, that means that it's really overflow shelter, a mat on the floor at Crossroads or at another agency. So over the course of that, those brutally cold temperatures and then the major snowstorm that we had right at the beginning of the year, we actually, over a period of those few days, served over 300 individuals and families in emergency shelter in one of the shelters that Crossroads operates. We had 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is Crossroads' mission, and we're always available, not just in these extreme weather conditions, but the fact is, being outdoors, being unsheltered is dangerous, not just when it's 2 degrees or below zero, but like today at 30 degrees. And it can be as dangerous to be homeless in the summertime when the temperatures are really, high. And so it's part of what we do, and the provision of emergency shelter, making sure that no person, family or individual is without shelter, is obviously sort of the crisis response, the immediate response. But then again, ultimately, the goal is to rapidly get folks housed. Our goal is that we don't have any person or family in shelter for more than 30 days, on average of 30 days. And that's very hard to do, again, given the cost of housing and the low availability of rental housing in particular. It's a challenge that we are constantly trying to overcome and be creative about.
So let's talk a little bit about this. Where do we, if we're talking about solutions and we're talking about finding housing for people, where does the housing come from? How do we go about this? How is Crossroads, because you have been successful providing, what was the stat that you gave me, 3,000?
We served over 3,200 people last year in one of our programs.
Okay,
Yep.
which is absolutely incredible. But you are committed to providing, the primary mission is to finding permanent residence for your patrons. So let's talk about this. If we're looking to provide solutions, how are you going about doing this? Because you have been successful.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we continue this, and how can we solve homelessness in our state?
Sure. So it's a combination of things, Molly. Crossroads as an organization owns or manages over 350 units of housing, so individual apartments, permanent supportive housing, and those units are really targeted to the individuals and families who have the most severe needs, the folks who need permanent supportive housing. That's housing that is permanent, it's affordable, and it comes with services to support the household in them. The great majority, however, of the people that we serve are their needs are more moderate, so they're considered in a category of rapid rehousing. And for those folks, we're using market rate housing. So we have resources, different programs, grant programs, particularly rental assistance that we receive through the state that helps subsidize the rent for these households for a limited period of time, giving folks time to get on their feet and to become stabilized. Back to the high cost of housing and the low availability. And so those two, it makes it challenging, but we're always looking for landlords and property owners who would be interested in working with us. It's a real advantage to property owners and landlords who, we can help keep their units filled and, get rid of some of the red tape for them in terms of finding tenants. And, the average person doesn't come with a social worker who's going to help support them help them if they run into trouble along the way. So one of the biggest things that we need are more units, more landlords willing to work with us and help them fill their units.
That's an interesting perspective. I'm wondering if you've had pushback from people saying we don't want to offer these services, or we don't want to offer our apartment space or condo space or whatever it is because they're worried about the clientele coming in.
Sure. Yeah, there's always folks who are hesitant or are not willing, but we have a great team of housing locators, housing navigators, and these are people who work in real estate field, and they understand what landlords and property owners are looking for and develop the relationships. And we say to landlords, give us one apartment, let us show you how this program works. And more often than not, I can't think of too many examples of landlords who said no, they weren't willing to go forward. We actually have landlords now who are looking to acquire more property so that they can work with us more. But there's still, we have waiting lists, unfortunately, of families and individuals who are waiting for available housing.
That's, what you said before though, there's people applying that they want to work with you, so that's phenomenal.
Definitely.
Talk to me a little bit about what you see, and we've talked about this a bit, what you see the biggest challenges are for Crossroads and for combating these, combating homelessness as we move forward in 2018.
Sure. So it's, funding is always the biggest challenge that we have, Molly. The fact is we get only some of the funds we need to operate through government grants and contracts, and we rely greatly on individual donors, corporations, people who support our work. And Rhode Island's a small state. It's hard to continue to grow those resources. The fact is the government funds and contracts tend to be level funded from year to year or cut, and so prices continue to rise, costs increase. We're trying to keep the professional staff that we have, and all of us need to make our livings, and so it's there's so many factors that are complicating the work. At the end of the day, it's the support and generosity of folks helping to keep us doing the great work that we do.
I think that a lot of attention has been brought to homelessness, and I think that has helped reduce the stigma. That's what I'm hoping. I've read a lot of articles about this. I've read, there was actually a photographer who I was hoping to have on the show soon, who's worked to bring a lot of attention to homelessness and tell people's stories. Do you think that we still need to work to fight stigma? Is that still a challenge?
I think it absolutely is, although I agree that, there's definitely been some progress made. I think, the more we can do to educate folks about who really are the people who are experiencing homelessness. The great majority of folks who find themselves homeless, it happens once in their lifetime, it's for a brief period, and they'll never be homeless again. And I run into people all the time who tell me, when they find out what I do or where I work, say, when I was in this circumstance, perhaps in college or a younger person, or my family went through something like this. It can happen to anyone, and while we still do need to work on the stigma that it's that is associated with it, the fact is it really is a situation that we were looking at the 2017 numbers, and we noticed a trend last year with our families experiencing homelessness. Traditionally, families who've come to us for emergency shelter have been about 70% of them have been single parents, predominantly single moms with children, and then about a 30% two-parent families. Last year, we saw a 10% increase in the number of two-parent families.
Wow.
And that says something to me, again, about, what's happening out in the, in the economy, that we have more and more two-parent families seeking shelter and very often the families are, the parents are working, and so it's a misconception that you become homeless if you're unemployed or only receiving public benefits. That's just not the case.
I mean, that's striking, the fact that it's gone up 10% just in the past year.
Right.
So, and I'm just thinking as you're talking, what would we do? What would we do without Crossroads, right?
Thank you. Yes, and I wonder that too. Although, I mean, the goal is that we don't, to reach a day where we don't need Crossroads, at least not
Exactly.
for the shelter part of what we do.
Yeah.
I think Crossroads will always be around providing that permanent housing, right? The ultimate final and long-term solution for homelessness.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be at a point in time, whether it takes 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or moving out of that emergency response and into that long-term response. Hopefully, I mean, is that kind of the goal? Do you have like a long-term mission statement?
And that actually is, it is already happening, Molly. So since Crossroads a number of years ago really shifted our philosophy and our service delivery from a shelter and crisis response to a housing response, and we've been able to see results of that. Again, if we're limiting the flow at the front door, reducing the number of people who find themselves experiencing homelessness, and then on the back door, making sure that we get folks housed. But it's an availability of housing, so that making sure that we have enough units of enough homes and apartments for folks to go to is really critical. We one of the programs we operate is the Harrington Hall Shelter in Cranston, Rhode Island, which is a state funded shelter for men. The Harrington Hall Shelter has 112 beds in it, and for many, many years was always at or beyond capacity. Last year, we focused our efforts on trying to house the long-term chronic homeless, the men who had been staying there for years and years and years. And there was a point last year where we had 5 men who had been basically living at Harrington Hall. These 5 men had a combined total homelessness of 47 years.
Wow.
And we housed those 5 men. And when you take those 5 people and house them, that's 5 beds that had been occupied every single night for years. Suddenly there's a lot more capacity in the system to take care of the folks who find themselves, for a brief period of time experiencing homelessness. So it's something that we're really proud of, and it proves that the model and the service delivery and the philosophy of Housing First really works.
Michelle, I think we'll end on that note, because that is a very good, it gave me goosebumps talking about that, and I bet those men, what a feeling of pride and joy that they could then find themselves at home.
Absolutely. It's where everyone should have a home.
I think that's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Michelle. I hope you'll come back and chat with us some more.
I'd love that. Thank you, Molly.
I would love that too. So thank you for joining us here on Go Local Live. Please hang tight, everyone, as we get set up for our next guest.